All right, good afternoon. We're in Green Cove Springs, Florida, and I've got the pleasure of speaking to Gene Odom today. He, as we're relating this this video to Rolling Stones, Gene worked with the Rolling Stones for a year in 1975 and 1975 tour, which as Stones fans realized was possibly their biggest tour and made them really into superstars with that. So Gene was a part of that, and I appreciate you being here today, Gene, to talk to us a little bit about that. So going before 1975, there's a story that Ronnie went in 1965 to a show in Jacksonville Coliseum, and I read there was a gentleman by the name of Rick Doschler who drove Ronnie to the show, and they went to that. Can you tell me about that?
To see the Stones.
Correct.
I think that was in '64, maybe. It may have been '65. I can't remember. I always thought it was '64. Yeah, Rick Doschler. And he had a little band. I don't think Ronnie knew at the time that he had a band. And what they called themselves. Good Lord. I can't remember, but he had a band. And so after that, when Ronnie came back, Mick Jagger was doing that dancing on stage, shuffling his feet around. Ronnie came back doing that, and I'm gonna be a singer. And so he went with it was Jimmy Parker, Rick Doschler, Steve Rosenbloom, and Ronnie went over and said, "Hey, y'all looking for a singer?" And so anyway, to make a long story short, they only wanted to play blues music, and they wanted to do cover tunes, blues music. And Ronnie says, "Hey, we can write our own songs. We can write our own music." And if I'm not mistaken, they didn't want to do that. They just wanted to play blues music and cover tunes. And so Ronnie wasn't with them that long. I don't know I can't remember how long. And we played baseball, and he was playing ball, and Bob Burns was on third base. And at that time, Ronnie didn't know that Bob Burns was on third base, or Bob Burns was a drummer. And Ronnie hit a line drive, and people think the ball hit Bob in the head. It hit him in the shoulder, right in the shoulder blade, right above there, stung the piss out of him, knocked him down. Ronnie ran out there, and somebody said, Bob Burns. And Ronnie said, "You're Bob Burns?" I said, "Yeah." So you play drums? Bob says, "Yeah." Right down the road at my house, Gary Rosington and Larry Junstrom and Bob Burns rehearsed there, played there. They invited Ronnie to come down. Ronnie went down there, and he liked what he saw, and he kind of like took over the band, And it was Bob, Ronnie, and Larry Junstrom. Bob, Ronnie, Larry Junstrom, and Gary Rosington, And so Gary kind of took it, that was his band. He put that thing together, So then it developed from that, on to what it became.
So that show that Ronnie went to see the Stones, did you must have known he was going to that? Did you get invited to go on that trip? Apparently, they drove there in a '63 red Corvette. It might have been Rick's.
I don't think Bill Ferris had one at that time. The Rick Doschler guy and those three guys that were Jim, they come from the rich side of town, Artiga. We call it the rich side, and their family had money, whatever, and they had a car probably. And I don't know what I was doing at the same time that they went to that show. I might have been picking up Coke bottles, Coke bottles, not beer cans back then, but Coke bottles. 65.
Yeah, they played there on May 8th, 1965 in the Jacksonville Coliseum.
I was out of school at that time. I don't know if I would have been invited, or I can't remember on that back there, but
So
Probably had something else
you
to do.
mentioned Ronnie was digging moves like Jagger.
Yeah,
So
I was
why?
ironworking. I think because Daddy kept me ironworking and welding. I started about 65 when I started working.
So if he admired the moves like Jagger, why didn't he try to emulate Jagger in his performances, do you think?
Well, once he got his own band to go together, he developed his own style, and he couldn't dance. He knew he couldn't dance, so he didn't do no dancing. You know, it was carry that microphone around, you know, and strut barefooted on stage, you know, and he couldn't dance.
So let's fast forward to 1975. The Rolling Stones are about ready to embark on a 3-month tour, and in June of that year. And I'd just like if you could, for Rolling Stones fans, they'll be probably fascinated with the story of how this all went down with you working as an iron worker in Palatka, Florida, and you get a phone call, and within a short period of time, you're on tour with the Rolling Stones. How
That
did
was
this all come about?
that was in 75.
1975, correct?
75. You said 65.
My bad.
Um, I was ironworking. Actually, I was building the two powerhouses in Palatka, I think, or the paper mill, one or the other. And they were having Ronnie's Ronnie's manager was the tour manager at the time with the Stones, and I don't know if he's anything else besides the tour manager. And so
Is that Peter Rudge?
Peter Rudge, yeah. And so the Stones had done a movie. Excuse me, was making a movie. I can't remember the name of it.
Gimme Shelter?
Give Me Shelter, yeah. And so they were having some trouble with with um, the biker gang, and I didn't know nothing about none of that stuff. And so they they couldn't go to everything the Stones does then and now is all always private. Parties or anywhere they go is private, and so they were having people come to the private parties that hadn't been invited, and so wrong crowd of people, and so they couldn't get nobody the, to be a bodyguard or security that could handle that. So I'm iron working, and Ronnie calls me up. He said, "Hey man," he said, "the Stones need a bodyguard, and Peter Rudge is our manager, and you're the man. You're the guy to handle it. You know, I want you to come up here and work with the Stones." It was the tour of the Americas. I didn't know it was the Hells Angels that was bothering them at that time. When I got to New York, Ronnie told me. He said, "You know, this is what's going on," and I went, "Whoa." I said, "I'm going to the airport. Get me a ticket." He said, "They just sit down." I said, "Oh man, I ain't gonna butt heads with the Hells Angels. You know, no way, no way, no way." He said, "Come on, man." He said, "Just sit down." I said, "No." I said, "I'm going to the airport, boy. You get me a ticket, or I'll get me one when I get there somehow." Sit down, man. He pulled a drawer out and pulled a book out. Book, you know, and he picked the phone up, you know, and he dialed his number. And the only thing he said was, "He's here. All right, we'll be waiting." And he hung the phone up. And he says, "That was Mario." I said, "Who's Mario?" "President, East Coast chapter of the Hells Angels. He's coming to pick us up, take us to dinner." I said, "You can take me to the airport. I ain't messing with these people." I said, "I ain't getting involved." I said, "This is crazy." "No, man." He said, I got you covered. I got your back." Mario showed up. He wasn't on no motorcycle. He was in a big old limousine sitting in the back seat. We got to introduce ourselves, you know, me and him introduce ourselves, you know. Right off of the bat, I let him know that I would be going home shortly. I'm not going to butt heads with the Angels, you know. Yeah, he said, "Just, you know, this is going on, you know." I said, man, look here. I respect you folks. I said, I don't want no problem with you. No way. I'm going to be going home either tonight or tomorrow. He said, nah, he said, you just hang around and just do your job. He says, we ain't got no problem with you, but our problem is with the Stones. And they know, they wouldn't know what's going on. And you couldn't stop us anyway. I said, I know that. That's why I don't want no problem with you folks. No, he said, you just do your job. So we got through supper, dinner, supper, whatever you want to call it, and came back and we shook hands. He said, man, he said, you just do your job. He says, we'll take care of everything. Our problem is not with you, it's with the Stones. I said, all right. I said, you ain't gonna have no problem. I said, I don't. He said, don't worry, you just do your job. Anyway, so
So did who had the final say in your hiring? Was that Peter Rudge, or do you think it went directly to the Stones to have to approve your hiring?
Mick Jagger. So I told Ronnie. He said, come on, Gene. He says, come on, man. He said, they need somebody. You're the man, believe me. Anyway, right quick, like I found out what the problem was. The problem was the two limo drivers. So I had in the Stones shit can those two limo drivers, and that eliminated that problem. And so it didn't go over well with the other side, but everything smoothed out. And then the party, and when we departed at the limo, we shook hands. Everything's gonna be fine. He says, "We might try you out." I went. I said. He said, "Everything's gonna be fine. Just do your job." So at the private party that night, the Stones also had two monster security guys, both of them named Bob. I call them Big Bob. Muscles this big. One of them was the national freestyle wrestling champion for Kent State. They were teachers. The other was the national freestyle arm wrestling, and the other was the national freestyle wrestling. Oh, arm wrestling champion. Monster guys. So they were under me, and we became good friends right quick. Like, and at the party, when it dawned on me what he said. We might try you out. About the time it happened, here come a guy that was not a Hell's Angel. He was probably one training to be, or what you call a want to be or going to be. You had to go through to be a Hell's Angel. You had to go through a process to become one. And here he come walking up. So I got between Big Bob's, and I said, "This is a private party, son. Nobody come in here." And he said, "I'm going in there." I said, "This is a private party, son. You can't come in here." And he tried to push by me, and I went, "Bob, is he coming in?" And they had microphones. He reached up with one hand and grabbed that microphone. The other hand, he just got that boy by his Levi jacket right there. Just picked him up and threw that guy about 4 or 5 feet right through there. And that guy's feet hit the ground. He kept on going. And I went, damn. I said, how strong are you? He says, bench press about 450.
So did this take place before the tour started?
No, the tour was already
okay.
Was on tour.
Okay.
That was in
so
that was in New York. That was the first show that we did was in New York.
Those are the first shows you started working?
Yeah.
So they spent 10 days in New York and had 6 shows there.
Right.
And that's where you came. So you mentioned a few times, you mentioned your job. What exactly was your job?
For security, for the Stones and for Lynyrd Skynyrd. And with Lynyrd Skynyrd, it was more personal. It was to try to wean them off and just try to clean them up. And the quote from Ronnie was, he said, "You're the only person in the world that can do this." He says, "And I got faith in you." He says, "It's going to be tough. I'm going to have to show you people that you don't want to deal with, that you're going to have to bypass them somehow." And dope dealers. And he says, but you're the only person who can do this. That'll take care of us, you know. So, yeah, it's
Good?
going down, yeah. You want to get out of it?
We can get out of it.
All right, let's get out of this.